This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze, because life is the maze. There's no direct line from where we are to where we're going. The journey has twists, turns, and throws obstacles in our way. But at each intersection, we have choices. And when we walk with mindfulness, we become more attuned to our surroundings and the unexpected opportunities that rise with each step. Now, you don't have to navigate this path alone. In fact, my guest today will show you that you do not have to be alone. There are others like you, staring down blank walls and wondering which direction to take next. This podcast is a space for shared experiences, because sometimes the story you may hear will echo your own. And that moment of connection might be exactly what you need. My guest today, Shea Belsky, I met on podmatch.com. Now, when I read his bio, I sort of thought I was reading my son's bio. And I got this great connection. It was like, I am so glad there is somebody else out there whose parents didn't listen to, your child has a diagnosis and this is what you can expect. Shea obviously had parents who said, okay, our son has a diagnosis, but we're going to keep moving forward and we're going to see where we land. Shea's bio is just incredible, because the schools you went to, the companies that you've worked for, most people would dream to be in your shoes. And yet, at some point, somebody told you it couldn't be done. So, Shea, welcome to Avoid the Maze, and take us on your journey.
You're making me blush. Thank you for that very, very incredible introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Shea Belsky. I am an autistic self-advocate. I am a graduate of Cornell University. I studied there for my bachelor's and master's professional studies in information science. And my journey really begins, to your point, when I was 2 years old. My parents and family members had noticed that I was having some developmental challenges, some sensory issues, and things weren't exactly kosher as far as what they expected my growth to look like, comparing with a cousin of mine who was almost the same age as me. Probably specialists, pediatricians, and I was diagnosed with autism, Asperger's at the time. They don't diagnose Asperger's anymore, but at the time that was the diagnosis. And the doctor said to my parents, like, your son may never lead a full independent life. They may live with you for the rest of their lives. They might not have a job. They might not drive a car. A lot of they might nots. And now, 28 some years later, I drive a car just fine. I was married to the love of my life for about a year and a half now. I work full time at a big tech company outside of Boston, and I'm just really excited to not only have had the success, but to have had the support of my family and friends and loved ones to be able to even get this far. Because had they not believed in what I was capable of doing, that it would never have happened.
So, you were diagnosed 28 years ago. My son was diagnosed 29 years ago. He was 6 years old when he got diagnosed. And back in the 90s, it still was a mystery as to what is the autism spectrum. In fact,
course.
They didn't even look at it necessarily as a spectrum. It was like, oh, you're autistic. And there was a picture in somebody's mind. This is what autism looks like. But yet, I'm sure you had people say to you as you've been growing up, you don't look autistic.
I mean, I get that all the time. People compare me to Rain Man. They compare me to Atypical. More and more often, I'm being compared to a little bit more ubiquitous media, like Love on the Spectrum is something I get compared to quite often. And people do expect there to be a stereotypical look or feel or behavior. And my parents and I sometimes joke that I don't act autistic enough, and people give them a hard time. And I find myself asking, like, do I act more autistic so that people give them less of a hard time? Because the last thing that I want is for my parents to feel like scrutiny or judged for their actions when they did everything right and were doing the best that they could to support me. So I don't want my parents to feel like they're on the wrong end of the argument when they're being told I'm not autistic enough. At the same time, like in 1998 when I was diagnosed, um, like the definition of autism came from medical textbooks. Like the internet wasn't really a big thing just yet. It was starting to get there, but we don't have like social media, Wikipedia, or any sort of online social reference like we do today. So the definition of autism or what it should look or sound like largely came from medical texts and like the few films, TV shows, and books that were out there at all, which also predominantly featured white American men like myself. So it really was an interesting time to be diagnosed in.
Exactly. So you proved some people wrong. So as my son, in fact, when my son was 11 years old, he was getting services from the County Board of Mental Retardation, because it was the only place that we could go to get some support at that time. And they decided he had to have a psychiatric evaluation. And we went along with it, not knowing why he had to have it, but hey, if it was going to give him, the assistance, let's do it. And the doctor called us in, my husband, myself, and my 11-year-old son. And she said, I just want you to know you can give up your dream of playing baseball, Alex. It's never going to happen.
That's an awful thing to say.
Absolutely. You're not going to graduate high school on your own. You're not going to go to college. And then she had him turn around, and there was a young man out in the hallway who was sweeping, and he was singing as he was sweeping. And she said, that is your life. And if your parents cannot come to that conclusion today, we may have to separate you from your parents.
It's so demotivating.
It was horrible. My husband ran out screaming at her. I'm sitting there paralyzed. And my son looks up at her and he goes, I got to go take care of my dad. And she said, oh no, you need to sit down. And he looked her straight in the eye and said, I'm out of here.
Wow.
That's when,
Kudos to your son for
oh,
standing up for himself and for you and your husband.
absolutely. And it was that day that we saw a huge transition in him. It was like, you can call me whatever you want, but I'm going to prove to you who I can be. And we always suggested that to him. You want to play baseball? Play baseball. You want to perform, because he loves to perform, be a performer. Do what makes you feel good. And yet,
It doesn't mean that you and your husband probably aren't afraid of what's going to happen, but that's similar to how it was for me too, where like, sure, my parents were afraid of me going out to Cornell, but they weren't going to stop me if my heart was set on it. Like I applied early decision, I got in early decisions, and there was no going backwards from that. They wouldn't let me do it if they really, really, really thought it was a bad idea.
exactly.
But they were confident not only could I do it, that I could thrive there. And over time, that became abundantly true that I was thriving at Cornell. And don't get me wrong, I was struggling like every other college student was, but like not any different from how they were, like managing schedule and managing the freshman 15, like most freshmen do, figuring out things. But like the challenges that I had at Cornell, I did have challenges about me being autistic, but then many of my other challenges were the same as everybody else's were. So it wasn't like I was alone in that department. And I think that made them feel better that like what I was going through was for once like not unique to me, that there were other people going through the same things I could rely on, I could ask for help, and the resources were more ubiquitous for them as well.
So you took your background and your education and chose to be an advocate. And my son did that in high school and in college, and then he stepped away from it because he felt that he wasn't making the impact he wanted to make. And so he said, I'm going to leave it to people out there who can do it better than I. What made you decide that this was going to be your focus?
It's an interesting question because I don't feel like it's like my number one full-time focus. I wish that it were. But at the same time, like for those people for whom it is their full-time job, like it can be a stressful thing. It's a challenge having to convince people and try to change a world that is so far bent in one direction to give ever so slightly into another. And what I realize as well is that to your son's point, like that's kind of draining. It's exhausting and you don't feel like you're making a difference. And the way that I enjoy my advocacy and why I continue to do it is trying to be intentional and thoughtful about where and how I do it. Not trying to change the world, but by trying to change the people and places and things around me. Like trying to keep my focus to the Northeast of the USA and trying to do local things in the Boston area, local events, local conferences, local meetups. And I think that helps me feel the impact of my advocacy a lot more tangibly because it's a little bit more local. And it's not just about like feeling like I've done something, but knowing that I put in my best effort and I'm being intentional and thoughtful about how. Because again, I can't make the world bend so slightly, but if I can still influence people and try to get people to think about something in a different way, then that's still an impact. And like I always think about little impacts that I've made too, even small impacts are big. I was at a conference one time in February and I spoke with someone after an event that I did. I gave a talk and we had a little conversation about someone that she was working with who was autistic. And I'm like, oh, like, try these things, try this thing, whatever. We have a conversation and then I forget about it. And then like 2 months later, they came back up to me, the same person, and they're like, oh my gosh, like what you said like really resonated with this person and talked about it with people in the workplace. It really landed. And I wanted to say thank you. And this was like one person, but I still like felt that I made a difference for this one person. And that one person has a ripple effect because it's not just one person, it's one person and their family and their friend and their workplace. It goes beyond just the one person. Even if it only looks on the surface as one person, there's a big iceberg underneath.
Well, you are so right. It takes one person to keep it going. And at this company where my son was working and it didn't work out, one of the things that did work out were his peers, so not management, but his peers all learned that autism wasn't what they thought it was. And they have become a close knit group, even though he has moved 4 hours away. They still keep in touch with him. And so that is the ripple effect that we want people to understand. But you brought something up earlier about your parents, because I know one of the things that we went through was that my husband and I lost many of our friends once our son was diagnosed. People didn't know how to connect with us, or they would look at our son and say, well, he looks normal. Why are you pushing that he's autistic? Or, you know, he does strange things. So, one of the things he did, and we didn't know it was flapping at the time, but he would flap, but he loved baseball. So we thought he was swinging a baseball bat. So when people said they didn't like that movement, I said, he's just, that's his baseball.
Get used to
And
it.
having to explain those things alienated us more. Do you think your parents went through things like that when you were growing up?
I mean, did they? Probably. I was very young, so do I have
Yeah.
memory of it? No, but did that happen? I would be surprised if it hadn't. I think my parents were number one reason why I'm doing any of this at all. Again, they were a really big, important part of me feeling like I was able to be a little bit experimental and risky and try things that maybe wouldn't have worked, but help me build confidence, help me build momentum, and help me become a little bit more independent, more autonomous, and um, able to advocate for myself a little bit better. It's not just about the appearance of being less autistic because that's what people expect, but it's being able to articulate what being autistic means to other people who don't understand. Like my autism, I would say, was more on the social sensory lens more than anything. I I definitely stimmed. I do still stim to an extent. I had like little behaviors and things that I would do, but by and large, I was really lucky and fortunate to have friends and family who were accepting and understanding of that I know of. If there were people who were dismissive of it or were against it, I don't have direct knowledge of it. Doesn't mean that it isn't there, but I also think there's something to be said for being blissfully unaware of it as well.
Got that.
Um, and I think that helped a lot.
And one of the things that you shared is that you've been married. You married the love of your life. And there are people out there, and I remember the same psychiatrist telling my son, you're never going to have a girlfriend, you're never going to get married. Um, Sometimes he wonders if she had a magic ball in front of her because he's been so busy with his career. No, he's not married. He doesn't have a significant other at the present time, but he knows that it has nothing to do with who he is, other than he is just very devoted to his career. When you started dating and when you met your wife, was there was there a conversation about I'm on the spectrum and this is what I've been through, or did it just come naturally?
With my wife specifically, I think I told her about 2 or 3 months in. I think it was closer to the 2 month mark. What's also important to note for context is that we started dating on February 1st, 2020. So the world shut down for the first COVID lockdowns about a month and a half into us dating. And so about like late March 2020, I said like, hey, like my parents have like a ski condo in the Catskills. Do you want to come self-isolate for 2 weeks? And she said, yeah. So we lived with each other for 2 weeks, having known each other less than 2 months. And that was a very interesting time in our relationship. And we were very emotionally available, very open and honest of a lot of things that some couples don't get to until they're a year or so in. And one of those things was me being autistic and trying to describe it on her terms, like, this is what this means to me. This is what you should expect. This is kind of like what it means for our relationship. And we talked about it for like an hour or so. She was incredible about like asking questions, about trying to understand, which was more than a lot of previous relationships had done, where they just turned away or were dismissive or just kind of like were able to trying to push past it. But she wanted to understand, like, what did that mean as far as how I behaved, how I communicated, how I talked? Because up to that point, she had a lot of the same stereotypes as anybody else, and
Right.
why wouldn't she? And it's not her fault. It's just the world that we live in. So I have to kind of like slowly unpack those stereotypes, talk about it, and that sort of thing takes months on its own. But I think the more and more time that we spent together and talked about things, the more and more open she was to checking that baggage at the door, which is what I tell people about autism. I'm like, whatever you think you know about autism, let's just take a step back for a second and
Yeah.
actually evaluate it for real.
Yeah, there are days that I think I don't know anything about it, to be honest. And especially since so much has changed in the diagnosing of it. Like you said, when both you and my son were diagnosed, you were diagnosed as Asperger's. Asperger's is no longer a so-called thing. Now we have level 1, 2, 3, and that even confuses me because I've seen people who have evolved into from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1. And I think that has a lot to do with the support system, which is important. And one of the things that I noticed that you are doing, you work with companies to help accommodate disabilities. And the reality of it is, we all have some sort of disability. We aren't all exactly, you know, at the same level of smartness, awareness, and abilities. Um, my husband, he can pick up a piece of chalk and he can draw beautifully. Give him a pencil to draw, not going to happen. Okay. But he's got that ability. You give me a pencil, a piece of chalk, a paintbrush, it's going to look absolutely terrible. Do not have the ability, and actually don't even care that I don't have the ability. But we tend to look at individuals and expect certain things out of them. How do you help companies work more and be more accommodating?
The biggest thing that I have focused on, which is this idea does not belong to me, it is belonging to the entire disability community, is that people with disabilities are often only being seen as disabled, as having a defect, as having something wrong with them. And that applies a lot to neurodivergent people too. People who are autistic, like myself in the workplace, are only seen as having defects, communication issues, social issues, sensory, whatever it is. We're talking about your son before this call and about how his workplace gave them a hard time over their communication and how they took in information. But what companies often miss is that when they are not just willing and able, but eager to support their employees with disabilities and are providing them with accommodations, manager training, team training, and the safe psychological environment and culture within which to talk about disability, then all these employees are able to perform as well as their able peers or better in many cases. Like, I consider myself very good at my job. And one of the reasons why I'm good at my job is because I have the support of my team and they all really understand like what my being autistic means to them. I have what I call a working with me document, manual of me, personal Bible. There's a lot of different terms for it that describes in a couple of pages. It's not exactly that many pages. It
Right.
is many pages long. One of those pages is about me being autistic, and I go into what you should expect. I might not make eye contact all the time. I might be fidgeting with something with my hands. I might flex my hours. There's a couple things on there, but I really set the terms for what me being autistic means to them. And don't hallucinate or imagine more than that. And this is what I need as far as me being autistic. And when my needs are met, I'm really good at my job. And they see the fruit of that labor and they don't question it. And so that helps a lot in my workplace. And that is how I try to help companies think about it too. Like my current employer, I'm the leader of the Disability Alliance ERG. I'm one of the leaders. And we as a community, as an ERG, is an employee resource group. We are a collection of employees who are disabled, who have disability, who have a loved one who is, or a friend, or care about this space to make our company a much more inclusive and open place to anybody, regardless of their ability or disability.
We have to stop looking at people and assume and making assumptions. Um, I remember when I was growing up, I have two older brothers, and for some reason, my brothers and my father are very good writers, and they determined that I was not a writer, I shouldn't write, and leave the writing to them. And every time I tried to write something out, my father would look at it and would say, honey, you don't have to write. You can do something else with your time. And I always felt like there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know how to express it. When my father passed away, I wrote his eulogy. After I gave the eulogy, my brothers came up to me and said, where did you learn to write? And I said, it came from the heart. That's something that you and Dad never explained to me. If you write from your heart, you can write. And my brothers looked at me differently from that day forward. I wasn't this little sister who had some sort of writing disability. And I became part of their team. So we have to stop making assumptions. Sometimes we have to, dig deep and help that person. And that's
That's
what it sounds like
powerful.
you're doing. So where do you see your growth helping other companies?
I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at this point in time is going beyond simply like workplace accessibility and trying to pivot more into digital accessibility and trying to make like products and applications better. That would be like my long-term pipe dream will be to work on making the actual products accessible as well. I think there's two different like sides of that coin. There's many sides. Two of those sides are workplace accessibility, improving the experience of employees, and then improving the experience for users and customers of products. That was something that I did at a startup that I worked at, Mentra, where I focused really hard on making the experience cognitively accessible to people who are neurodivergent. If you were ADHD, autistic, colorblind, whatever it was, or dyslexic, that our application and our platform was accessible regardless of what disability that you had. And that was something that I felt was very important and passionate to me. And so I think one of the next steps from workplace accessibility is product accessibility and making it so that your digital products work for everybody. It's the same reason that we have curb cuts on the sidewalk, that you have ramps, that you have elevators. These are physical affordances and tools that people in the world use if they have a wheelchair, obviously, or crutches, but also if you have a temporary disability, if you are pushing something in a hand cart, if you have a stroller, if you are holding somebody's hand, there's a lot of reasons why those things benefit people, even if they don't have what you'd consider an obvious disability. And so product accessibility benefits everybody. And that's kind of what I'm pivoting to next in a perfect world.
You know, a very good point you're bringing up. I have a handicap on my car. And the reason I have it is either I'm clumsy, not sure what, but I've had too many falls in the past 4 years, including broken bones. And so my doctors determined that I should use handicap parking, especially if I'm feeling that it's too far to walk or whatever. Now, I go walking all the time, okay? But I'm extremely careful. But I've had people who have questioned me when I pull into a handicap spot and I get out and they look at me. And I've had people say to me, "You don't look handicapped." Well, I don't always park in the spot except when I absolutely physically need it. And we have to stop second guessing people. And that is part of the thing that I have learned in the past couple of years is that we don't know what somebody else is going through. And if you don't know, don't make assumptions. But if we can make things more accessible to all people, we're going to have a much better world that we're going to live in.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. You are phenomenal.
Thank you.
I think you're going to make some great strides for more individuals out there. And I think it's important for companies to understand that you have to look at the whole person when you are doing the hiring process, not just a diagnosis. And if you look on most job applications today, almost everything is a disability. Do you know migraine headaches is a disability and diabetes is a disability, but they don't keep people from working. Autism doesn't keep people from working. We've got to reach out and work together. Any last words, Shea, that you want to share?
The biggest thing that I can say is repeating what you said. Don't assume what you know about somebody based on how they look or how they behave or what label you think that they do or don't have. Seek to understand, be inclusive, and just be supportive, whatever way that that means for them. Treat people how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Thank your wife for being a wonderful support and your parents for doing all they did as you were growing up. Have a great day.
You as
Bye-bye.
well.